We now have enough math to take on the address types. You may remember in IP version 4 we have unicast addresses, multicast addresses, and broadcast addresses. IP version 6 does away with broadcast and replaces it with something called Anycast. Alright, let's look at unicast first. There are really three types of unicast addresses. By unicast, of course, we mean one-to-one, one computer to another computer. And they come in these three types: global unicast, unique unicast, and link local. Global unicast addresses are one that your ISP would give you. It is your public IP address. So it's not very unlike the public IP address that you would have in your IP version 4. It's always going to begin with either a 2 or a 3. Anytime you see a IP version 6 address that begins with either 2 or 3, you know immediately that this is a global unicast or a public IP address. Let's take a look at what these addresses look like and see why they begin with either 2 or 3. They always begin with 001. By the way, this is the binary 001/3. Now what does that mean? What does it look like? Well, here's a binary 001, and the /3 means that the first 3 must always be the same. So that means it's capable of a 0010 or a 0011. Now, any of the address that comes after that, of course, is whatever it is. But these being the first bits, the first 4 bits of an IP version 6 address, as long as these first 2 are 0 and the third one is a 1, the only options you have for the next one are either a 0 or a 1. If it's a 0, then you have a hexadecimal 2. If it's a 1, then you have a hexadecimal 3, because you've got the 2's place and the 1's place. So it's either a 2 or a 3. And that's why all global address will be starting with 2 or with 3 in hexadecimal. I have on my computer, I keep track of IP addresses from day to day to see when things change and have a record of them. And let me open that document up. So every day my computer automatically does a date and time stamp and then gives me my public IP version 4 address and my public IP version 6 address. And you may notice that they always begin with a 2. As a matter of fact, they're always the same every day up through the first 64 bits, and then the last 64 bits changes from day to day, unlike my IP version 4 address, which stays the same from day to day. Alright, that's not what I wanted. Let's get back here. Alright, next is the unique local. These are very much like private addresses. These are used on the local network, and they're not used on the public network. That is to say, they're not routed out on the public network. And they always begin with either FC or FD. And again, here is why. Because they always begin with the binary 1111110/7. In other words, these are the first 7 binary digits. Let's go back here and look at that again. Well, if these 7 are always the same, these brown ones here, and I can't seem to do that without getting that other 0 in there. There we go. Do it by keyboard, then I can. Then that means that the next bit either has to be a 0 or a 1. If it's a 0, then this number becomes a D. If it's a 1, this number, that should be C. If it's a 0, this number becomes a C, and if it's a 1, this number becomes a D. So it's always either FC or FD. So anytime you see this, you're talking about a private address or a unique local address. Next we have link local addresses. These are very much like APIPA addresses. Remember the 169.254? That's an address that you get if you cannot contact a DHCP server, so your computer has to assign itself an address. And it gives it a 169.254 address in order to make it compatible with other PCs that might be on the local network, so that it has some sort of connectivity locally. Well, these are also self-addressing, and they are always going to start with an FE8 to an FEB somewhere in there. And again, here is why. Because it's a /10, it always begins with 1111, 111010. Let's take a look at that here. We have 1111, 111010. Now, if this portion of the address is always the same, that's an F and an E. And then here, this portion of it, up to here, we have the 8 or 9 or A or B, depending on what these become. And there are 4 options. So this would be an 8, a 9, an A, and a B. So these are always going to begin with FE8, FE9, FEA, or FEB. These are linked local addresses. Again, they are self-addressing, and your computer will assign itself a linked local address.